I did see, though, some interview with you where you said that you found one of Ric Flair's robes on an online auction or something like that.
Oh yeah, so you
And
saw.
you got it.
Yes, I've had several robes through the years. I was collecting these robes before I knew Rick,
No
but I
kidding.
knew they were investment vehicles. Let me explain. If you're not familiar with pro wrestling, he used to come to the ring in something that looks like Elvis Presley or Liberace would wear it.
More like Liberace, I would
There
say,
you go. But you remember like the jumpsuits that
Oh, yeah.
Elvis wore with all
Oh,
the
yeah.
sequins everywhere and the crazy designs. Well, Flair did that, and he thought it was a big part of the presentation, and that actually went back to Gorgeous George. Gorgeous George is kind of the innovator of that.
Yeah.
And even Muhammad Ali would say he borrowed from Gorgeous George's rap. It was all just about promotion. So Flair became, I guess, the second nature boy behind Buddy Rogers, and started putting that, on some sequins on a robe, and they got more ornate and more fancy. But then one day, I'm just scrolling. I'm a sports collector, so I have like an old pair of Ali's trunks and Tyson trunks, and I've got Joe Montana's jersey and just lots of silly stuff like that. But I thought from a wrestling fandom standpoint, like maybe the coolest thing you could own would be a Ric Flair robe. So I'm scrolling eBay and I found one and I couldn't believe it.
And it was legit.
It's legit. I knew it was legit. So I negotiated with the guy for the course of maybe 3 months, and then I bought a robe from him. And then when he got another one, he said, "Hey, do you want to buy this one?" Well, I negotiated and I got an even better deal, so I bought that one. So through the years, I've probably had 12 different ones, but there was one that always eluded me. One that was my really first impression of Rick is when he first came to the WWF in 1991. He showed up in a black robe with white feathers, and it had silver butterflies on it. And it was on the cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It was on the cover of the WWF magazine, and he wore it to the ring at the Royal Rumble in 1992.
Yeah.
And hardcore wrestling fans would say that's the greatest Rumble of all time. It had the most legends. The winner became the champion, and Flair became the first guy to ever win the WWF title and the NWA title. It was a big deal. It would be like if all of a sudden, Babe Ruth, wasn't with the Yankees and now he's with the Red Sox, sort of thing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. And that robe, nobody could find for years and years and years.
Had Rick sold it? Had it been stolen?
Nobody knew.
Oh, wow.
Now, Flair had had a bunch of robes stolen from locker rooms and dressing rooms and airports. All he knew, and even ex-wives. But he did say, "Hey, I don't know where it is, so it's clearly stolen because I didn't sell it." Well, it turns out the story we've heard is he forgot after a Monday Nitro in 1995 and left it hanging in the closet in Johnson City, Tennessee at a Holiday Inn. And they didn't know how to get a hold of him because in 1995, it's not like everybody had cell phones like they do now.
Right.
So somebody just kept it. Well, while they were filming Most Wanted Treasures for A&E, which is a WWE program, they found it. Well, it turns out the guy who wound up seeing the auction on eBay, he actually had a program set up to track when anything Ric Flair related was listed, because he had found some interesting things through the years that way.
So the dude had his own algorithm for searching Ric Flair stuff.
He did.
Wow.
And he found this robe before anybody, and he bought it dirt cheap relative to its value. But I knew the guy because this little circle of high-end wrestling collectors is pretty small. There's probably 6 major ones. There's a lot of others on the periphery.
Are you one of the 6?
I used to be. I'm not as active in it as I was. I found that I've gotten close enough now that my fandom has changed a little bit. I just view it differently, and I appreciate it differently. That's not to say I still don't have a pretty damn impressive collection. I do. But I'm just saying I'm no longer actively looking for the next thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's still a few things out there that, boy, if I could find that. But it's less about what else can I add to the collection and more about what are my grail pieces, if that makes sense.
Right.
Well, for years and years, I'd called out on podcasts because I would even watch along. I think in 2022, I watched, maybe it was before that, but on an anniversary date, I watched with Ric Flair that Royal Rumble back again. And I said into the microphone, "Hey, if anybody can find that, I'd be glad to get you a brand new Forerunner." I mean, like my DMs are open. Here's my email address. Anytime that robe came up, I threw it out there. Well, this fellow knew because we had done robe deals together that I was interested. So he reached out to me and we worked a deal out and we sort of recreated it for the TV show. That's not exactly how it happened, but it's pretty close. But either way, he got a wire, which was almost as much as I spent for my first house. And now I have the robe.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Good
But
Lord.
there's only a handful of things that I really, really wanted. And I had already achieved accidentally. My first wrestling collectible was the big gold belt. And it's the one that Ric Flair debuted on Valentine's Day, 1986, but they used it all the way through the end of WCW in 2001. So the same belt that he wore and Dusty Rhodes wore and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Sting is the same belt that like Hulk Hogan with the NWO played air guitar with on Nitro and Goldberg beat him. And the idea that I was able to find that, I thought, man, this would be like finding, like the Super Bowl trophy, they make a new one every year. This is like the Stanley Cup of
Wait, I'm
professional
taking
wrestling.
it back. They make a new one every year?
Well, yeah. If you go to Robert Kraft's office, I'm sure he's got a bunch of those trophies.
He's still got his
sitting
trophy.
around.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm saying this one, they didn't make a bunch of copies of. Like, that was the NWA belt. In the WWF, like, they just make like 5 or 6 a year. So there's just several of them that have this design. But this particular belt was 3 pieces of metal and 1 strip of leather, and it was used from 86 to 2001. So when I found that, I was like, this is like the coolest collectible ever. The second coolest would be if I could find Ric Flair's 1992 Royal Rumble robe. And when I did, I was like, oh, I got to put them together.
Okay, so, but now I got to chase this rabbit then real
Yeah.
quick. 2 questions. What is the most coveted piece of your personal collection of any kind of sports? Because I heard you say you're a big sports collector in general. And what is the one thing that's still out there that, by God, you haven't found it yet, but you're gonna?
That's easy. The big gold belt's number 1.
All right.
That's not close. I've been offered 6 figures for
Is
it
it hanging on a
multiple
wall
times.
in a shadow box, or is it locked in a safe deposit box?
WWE has it right now. They just had
kidding.
WrestleMania, and they wanted to display it. They put Lex Luger in the Hall of Fame finally, and that's a belt that he famously beat on the 100th Nitro.
You are Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
So he called, the archivist from WWE called and said, can I borrow the belt? And I said, absolutely. We've done it a dozen times before.
Yeah.
So they have it right now, so it's on loan.
Okay. So
But normally, yeah, it's at my house.
So what have you not found? What is the
one I
thing?
haven't
What is
found
the thing that if you could track it down?
The WrestleMania 4 or 5 or 6 Winged Eagle Championship, the world title that was worn by Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, or the Macho Man. The reason I'm specific about those 3 is they were dual plated, so it was nickel and gold. Starting at WrestleMania 6, every belt after that and through WrestleMania 14 was like all gold. But the look of that one, because that's when I really fell in love, was WrestleMania 5. The first WrestleMania I saw was on a double tape VHS at my grandfather's house. Once upon a time, we used to go to like Movie Gallery. Remember those days?
Man, yeah.
And so that's what my parents did. They were like, hey, this is a double tape set. This will be a heck of a babysitter for our 7-year-old annoying son. So I got to watch WrestleMania 4 and fell in love with pro wrestling. I had never seen it before. I was a G.I. Joe He-Man guy. So now to be able to see this was like, this is like a real life cartoon. I'm in. So if I could have the world title that one of those guys held when I first fell in love with wrestling, that would be it. But I've never found one person who has one or can even say they've seen it. So it's still out there somewhere, but I'll find it eventually. Time's on my side.
Can you find me the glasses that Roddy Piper wore in the movie They're Here, and that shows him where the aliens
They
are?
live.
They live. That's right.
Yes.
They live.
I might
sorry.
be able to find that. No, seriously, there is a niche collector. I know 2 people who would know where that is.
No kidding.
Yeah. The Underground Railroad of Wrestling Collectibles. Here I am as the Forrest Gump of that